Okay, kia ora everybody, and welcome to Future Whenua Summit. It's an absolute honour to be here gathered with all of you in person, and of course also grateful to be connected through space and time if you're watching this sometime in the future. This is our second summit. We held the first last year on our sheep farm in northern Southland. It's a 400 hectare property called the Montana Flat. It's where I was born and raised and where I live still now and work. I spent a bit of time in between. I went to Lincoln and did agricultural science, the sort of academia side of all this, and spent plenty of time in the Springston Tavern, and went overseas after that as well. And I was living in the States and California, and there was sort of this valued in the culture about like being aware of the world and knowing what's going on, and so spending a lot of time watching the news, and shit, that was depressing. So I got this bit of like nihilism and climate fatalism, and it steered me somewhere that like, I felt the times that were around us, and it seemed there was the fires and droughts and floods over here, and so my response to that was just to party a whole lot, and that took me around, and it was fun, and I sort of ended up traveling Europe and doing that, but quite a number of months into that I realized it's quite a unsustainable coping mechanism. And so I ended up on a small farm in Austria. It was 5 acres and almost entirely self-sufficient. And he had 20 different types of stock, classes of stock, and like a really chaotic but beautiful and abundant garden. And we're having these meals like turkey heart stroganoff and the rainbow of sides, and I was spending my days out with a scythe, and I was cutting this like huge ass grass and carting it back to the house into this machine that he had made himself, and running it through, and it was creating energy for the house. And it took me about 7 years to find out what that grass was, and fortunately we've got the guru of the subject coming to speak to us tomorrow. But yeah, I was reflecting about this beautiful thing that he had done on such a small amount of land, and then reflecting on our property, which was nearly 200 times the size, and our output was almost singularly lamb and wool. We barely had a garden going up to pick from. Every now and then we'd have some carrots and sugar snap peas, but it's a very far cry from self-sufficiency. So I got home, about 5 or 6 years ago, and that was the first aim, was just to get on that train and get on that path, and researching how to grow healthy tomatoes led into permaculture and no-dig gardening, and that led me to a bloke, Graham Sate, talking about cover crop cocktails, and we'll hear from Graham tomorrow as well. And and then through that I sort of started realizing, wow, these principles that I'm sort of learning about from my backyard, well, we can apply these on our entire farm. And sure enough, regenerative agriculture came to the sphere, and we started making some big changes on our property, just on how we manage our sheep operation. So we've sort of done away with the plough in recent years, and our winter cropping situation has gone from large monocultural swede or fodder beet, quite extractive crops, to something that's like a biodiverse oasis. It's amazing to go into our winter crops now. I was another person we're going to hear from this weekend. Joel Salatin is just an absolute legend and an icon of mine. And he's talking about this like stacking of fiefdoms and bringing in of different enterprises, and how they can, not just work in unison, but like create a greater whole by working in unison. And so it was just like this reflection on what is the ultimate land use for our property, what is the most holistic answer to how we can steward this land. And that definitely involved people and entertainment for me, because that was just by my nature. And bought a bunch of paintball guns, and we have 2 disc golf courses on the farm. That's really fun, and started a music and arts festival called Burning Horse, and that in a couple of years grew to one of the biggest in the province of its nature. And it was just, people were coming onto the farm, and without question, the like most regular feedback I got was just, "Oh, this is so beautiful, this land. I feel so connected, being able to have my bare feet on the soil and being able to swim in this river." And it was just this realization of, wow, even though we live in this farming nation, a lot of people don't have access to a farm. So many Kiwis are growing up and they don't have those, number 8 wire mentality that we're known for. And also the backpackers, they've come, some of them have gone from Cape Ranga to Bluff and made their way to Burning Horse, and they hadn't stepped foot on a farm until that point. So it became this thing about like, yes, it's regenerative agriculture, and yes, it's self-sufficiency, but it's also about how do we bring people together on the land. And as part of that journey as well is sort of, how do we take this self-sufficiency that I was doing for myself from my backyard and do it for an event of 800 people. And that sort of led into an explory of what I call polyculture paddock, which is really just like getting completely out of hand with the King Seeds catalogue and ordering like anything that looked real cool, and mixing those into some specific blends and direct sowing those. And so I was doing that and realizing, wow, it was actually so easy to do this compared to my backyard with it does take a lot of input, it takes a lot of education, it takes a lot of mahi, it takes a lot of care and attention to grow quality kai. But there are other options out there of how we can implement this, and we can, just that whole journey with polyculture had me really reflecting on the food system as a whole, and just our resilience and lack thereof resilience. So with COVID and had to put the festival on hold for a couple of years, it sort of just created space for a new endeavour, which was Future Whenua Summit. And the vision was really to have a multi-day event where we could come together, and some of these topics that I'd become really passionate about can come to the table, and we can draw on some of the wealth of knowledge that my information sits upon, and bring those together and have like a really diverse range of speakers and a really diverse range of attendants. And if we bring the gardeners and the farmers and the agribusiness and the scientists together, then can it create this sort of ethereal quorum sensing and lateral thinking and cross-contamination of ideas. So we did that, and it was a really good time. And shortly after, probably the first phone call I made was to Greg, and I said, hey, this is what's just gone down, Future Whenua Summit, and we're really stoked with it and want to do it again, make it an annual event, and every second year we want to host on the farm, and every year in between would like to go to another property that's embodying the principles. And so I'm so grateful that you said yes, Greg, because it is amazing to be here on Mangarara Station. What we just saw during the farm tour is incredible, your stewardship of this land and your vision and your sensing of what's important to be placing attention on. And I really think you're one of the greatest farmers in this country. And I say that without knowing anything about your financial performance or your KPIs. It's just like, it's that whole systems thinking and the just incredible hearty action. So I do have something I made for you, and it's a stone from Te Wai Punimu, and also a laser engraving of Mangarara. So
cheers.
Yeah.
Thanks, Rod.
No, cheers, man. It's sort of like just, we're here to have this conversation on the deepest possible level about like what are the opportunities that lie in the agricultural sector or the rural space in general. What can we do to hasten some of that or to amplify our voices in this crazy old world. And I guess if the old model is based on chemistry and economics, then the decision matrix of this new model sort of comes from a place of ecology, the wider ecology and enhancing biodiversity. Comes from a place of sociology, what are the relationships and the social structures that underpin all of this. And almost like a ontological level, like if we step right back and ask, who are we and why are we here, and what is the meaning of this, life. I think just like stepping to a place of that and asking those questions of ourselves is probably going to allow us to make more meaningful decisions than if we're making them from like a hour meeting with the bank manager. So it's like a living thing. This what I'd call the Future Whenua model or the holistic farming model. It's not like some predetermined set of rules or anything like this. It's living, it's evolving, and it's definitely co-created by us, and I'm sure it's going to be evolved in the next couple of days. I did just want to read out a couple of your responses on the attendance because they are really beautiful, and I thank you for showing up so fully to that. But yeah, this is a bit of the view of what the future of the whenua might mean to us. There is so much to be done. We are fortunate to live in very exciting times as there is an appetite for change. Land needs to be managed as an ecosystem in a way that values and honours food, fibre, natural habitat, native biodiversity and the environment rather than as a machine optimised solely for profit. A catalyst and or vision needs to be sparked to recreate our food systems. Collaboration of great minds is a great place to start, inspirational stories too. Sustainable productivity, enabling men and women and children to learn and thrive as nature and the planet also thrives uncompromised by our presence. We need substantial change to move forward as a species. Times are changing, we need to be able to adapt. We're not excited by the general direction of less animal-based nutrition and more synthetic factory food. As with many, we're concerned about the rising costs of production, especially for us poultry farm. Too much dependence on finite inputs. It is becoming of a primordial, paramount and extreme importance to reassess how to appropriately take care of our lands and the well-being and welfare of us all. We need to focus on creating regenerative potential and regenerative participation, both within the environment, ecosystem and community. Future land use is impossible to dissociate from everything else. Climate change, societal problems, potential energy shortages, a more regenerative future can help solve many of these problems as well as bringing beauty not only to the landscapes but also people's lives. I feel like we need to get back to a more simple life, growing more food, supporting local economy, eating healthy food and regenerating the landscape. I believe the future of the entire planet is wholly dependent on us regenerating our soils and oceans. I'm excited about the future of our land because of the initiatives being taken by proactive farmers such as Greg and Rachel Hart. You can see the results of their regenerative approach in their soils, their animals, and in their community. It's truly inspiring. Massive restoration efforts required across New Zealand for land, biodiversity, water, ocean, and humanity. Starting with the climate in our heads, many barriers exist to best use of our minds and resources. Building and encouraging future requires ways around these. We've only scratched the surface of how vibrant and alive our landscapes could be. Environmental outcomes on farm need to be better monetised. I also think that whilst this can be achieved, generally not via our conventional value change. In short, I am positive, but things need to change. The land needs us to take care of it in the best way we can, learning how to live in harmony with all of nature around us. How do we prepare for the succession of the land and attract the next generation? We need to start looking after the land so much better and not treat it like we have the right to abuse it. We need to be caretakers of it and show some respect. We need to do this so that we can leave it better than how we found it for our kids and grandkids. It's not really our land, neither are we really owned by the land. To me, people are part of a fractal living, self-organizing ecosystems we call home. That is, the land and us are co-responsible for each other. However, we happen to have the technological capacity to create devastatingly beautiful marks on these ecosystems. Whether or not these beautiful marks are life-giving or life-denying is being experienced as we seek. Unfortunately, our economic feedbacks seem to not necessarily promote life-giving ecosystem marks. We maintained our repos with creating the life-denying ecosystem marks by cherry-picking historical information to reinforce the myth of dominion. So yeah, those are some pretty awesome thoughts, and yeah, once again, thank you for coming to that exercise so fully. So I want to move on to some of our speakers, but just a short visual I'd like to create before we move forward. So if we could all just close down the eyes and take a deep breath. And another deep breath. And perhaps you can feel Mother Earth, Papa Tunuku. You can feel the energy from her rising through your feet or through your base of your spine. That might come to you in any way. And just with that connection, us as a group, we're all going to get Scrooge McDucked 100 years into the future. And we're coming into an agricultural utopia that is Aotearoa, New Zealand. We're sort of, scanning past this overview of the country, and just from coast to coast and from tip to the south, there's this matrix, a mosaic of different land uses, and there's regenerating bush connecting all the way from the south to the north, from east to west. There's finely set hedgerows that are full of native biodiversity, as well as other food-producing permacultural crops and pollinator species. And then we hone into a scene. It's a group of families. They're about to have a feast. These families live together on a small patch of land just out of town. They live in ecological structures, straw bale homes with straw located from the neighbouring arable farm, and the untreated pine framing from just around the road also. That's all clad in a cob, which is dug up from the farm, literally a stone's throw from where the houses were constructed. It's no uncommon thing for this group to gather together. They do it almost every night. But this is a very special occasion, for this is the Thanksgiving dinner of giving thanks to the tipuna, the ancestors that made this beautiful moment possible. On the table, this group, they're not occupation farmers or occupation gardeners, but they went through the school system, so of course they were completely literate in the permacultural principles and really capable at producing their own food and harvesting and other homesteading skills. So a lot of the food was prepared from themselves on their small bit of land, but the other parts was traded with neighbours. It was foraged on the roadsides, which is just absolutely ubiquitously filled with permanent agriculture, readily available as commons for anyone to pick and harvest from. The rest of the meal was sourced from one of the bioregional circular centres. These centres are a mixture of market garden, large food forest, that's like a repair cafe. It's sort of an all-in-one, this is going to sort out your needs place. They were created around every city and bioregion in the country as a response to the age of automation and the displacement of jobs. And so there was all these arguments in the early 20th century about what do we do with this, ever increasing lack of population. Do we just give them all money with the UBI? And these bioregional circular centres were the answer, which allows people to come and put in 4 hours of work and do simultaneously 4 hours of education of how to produce food, how to mend clothes, how to repurpose disused electronics and put those resources into a place that can be used once again. And at the very least, they'll go into like a plasma waste converter and just erode into their base elements. And, so back to this dinner, and it's just like a giving of thanks before we eat. You say, thank you, dear Puna. Thank you, dear Tipuna, for the bravery you showed in the early 21st century, especially for all of the challenges you were facing, and instead of rescinding into despair, you rose to the challenge and you acted with hearty compassion and alignment with nature. It's very hard to know what it was like for you before you had the connection that we all take for granted today. You were able, even without this sixth sense, to, use your intuition and use your intelligence to define what is necessary and what is important and what are the actions that we need to be placing your energy on. So thank you for acting with such integrity and developing the sense that we know as the connection which guides us today in our very actions. Thank you, brave Tipuna, for establishing the diverse hedgerow initiative that allows native birds to hop from one to another, and restoring some of the bird life which was known to even your ancestors and those ancestors. Thank you, brave Tipuna, for not sinking into despair, and just thank you for rising and doing everything that you did for creating this beautiful movement and allowing us to sit here in such complete peace and such complete freedom and enjoying this beautiful meal together. And then, from above we can all just be like, it's all good, guys, and sort of rescind back into the present moment. So that was just a bit of fun, but it does bring about this thing about what motivates us and where does it come. And I know for me, I wasn't that motivated by learning about the fires and the droughts and the insect apocalypse that's imminent in our future. It's important to be aware of this stuff. But I think it's also very important to be intrinsically motivated by something beautiful, something that we can aspire to, the beautiful vision that our hearts know is possible. So on that, I'm going to end this talk. Thank you for being with me, and I'm going to welcome Samantha to tell us about circular economies and how that can influence the path.